Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Sparkle English, where I help you improve your English level. Today we're going to talk about fragments and how to correct them. So first of all, what are fragments? A sentence fragment is a group of words that is punctuated as a sentence. However, it does not form a complete sentence, and therefore it is incorrect. It usually is missing one of the three main components: a subject, a verb, or a complete thought. We're going to take a look at different examples of fragments missing each of these components. First, let's look at sentence fragments that are missing a subject. For example, walking down the street. This is a fragment because we don't know who is walking down the street. It's not a complete sentence. We have the predicate, walking down the street, but we don't have a subject. To correct it, we would have to add a subject. Paul is walking down the street. And note that in this example, we also add is. Is an auxiliary verb or a helping verb because this sentence is in the present continuous. Here's another example of a sentence fragment. Damaged during the snowstorm. Well, we don't know what or who was damaged. So to complete the sentence, we would have to add a subject. The roof was damaged during the snowstorm. Or my trees were damaged during the snowstorm. Other sentence fragments are missing verbs. So we don't know what the action is. Let's take a look at this fragment. An old man on the park bench over there. Now this is quite a long sentence fragment, but there's no verb. What is the action? An old man on the park bench. We don't have an action here, so we have to add a verb. And we can do this in different ways. One way to fix this fragment would be an old man on the park bench over there is feeding the ducks. So now we've added a predicate. We've added some action. Another way to fix this: an old man is sitting on the park bench over there. Or an old man is on the park bench over there. If we said an old man is on the park bench over there, the verb is in this sentence would be a linking verb. So it's not showing action, however, it's connecting the subject with more information about the subject. In this case, his location. Here's another example of a fragment missing a verb. The best student in class. Well, we have the subject, the best student, but we're missing any action. So, for example, the best student in class won the award. Now we have an action. We have a verb. Or the best student in class always arrives early. Or you might use a linking verb. Maria is the best student in class. And finally, many different sentence fragments, and probably the most common type, do not express a complete thought, so they cannot stand alone. So many fragments are actually dependent clauses or incomplete ideas, and they need additional information to form a complete sentence. For example, because it was raining. This is a sentence fragment. We do have a subject, it, and we have a verb, was raining. However, it does not form a complete thought. We need more information. Because it was raining. Well, what are you talking about? So, for example, because it was raining, we didn't go to the park. Okay, now this is a complete thought. We have a dependent clause connected with an independent clause, and it makes sense. So now we have fixed the fragment. You might also reverse the order and begin with the independent clause. We didn't go to the park because it was raining. Let's look at another example. When he moved to France. Again, we have a subject and we have a verb. However, with the word when, We don't have a complete thought when he moved to France. We're missing information. So, when he moved to France, comma, he started learning French. Now it's a complete sentence. It can stand alone. He started learning French when he moved to France. So again, you can see that we use the comma after the dependent clause when it begins the sentence. But we don't use a comma if the sentence begins with the independent clause followed by the dependent clause with a subordinating conjunction, like because or when. So now let's talk about why sentence fragments occur and if they are ever okay. So sentence fragments often occur in casual speech or in stylistic writing like poetry, novels, in some news articles, etc. So they should generally be avoided in formal writing unless they are deliberately used for a specific effect, oftentimes for a dramatic effect. So for example, imagine this is a headline in a newspaper: war, period, famine, period, despair, period, the plight of a nation. Here we have single word fragments used to quickly draw attention to these important issues. Here's another example: no way, not happening, impossible. Imagine this is dialogue in a play or a movie. So characters in plays and films will often use fragments to make their speech sound more natural. When we are speaking naturally in English, we often use fragments or run-on sentences, and this is reflected in novels and in film, for example. Fragments are often common in poetry and used stylistically. So again, if you are a creative writer, writing poetry or a short story, feel free to use fragments if that is a part of your stylistic choice. However, in formal writing, this should usually be avoided unless it's deliberate. So now let's talk about how to identify and correct fragments. Here we have a sentence: Tyler drives carefully at night. So if you want to identify if a sentence is a fragment, remember to ask these 3 questions. Does the sentence have a subject? Well, yes, it does. Tyler. Does it have a verb or a predicate? Well, yes, it does. Drives. We have the verb. So check. And finally, does it express a complete thought? Tyler drives carefully at night. Yes, it does. We're talking about Tyler. The action is that he's driving carefully at night. So we know this is a complete sentence and it is not a sentence fragment. So keep this in mind as we do the next part of the lesson, which is our quiz. So I'm going to read a few short paragraphs, and you will have to identify and correct any fragments. Now, this is a short story, but for the purpose of this exercise, I don't want any sentence fragments. I am not making stylistic choices, so you must correct and identify all the fragments. So the story is about a dog named Copper. On a sunny morning, Copper explored our family farm. It had rained the previous night, and Copper loved trotting through the muddy fields, wagging his tail at every new scent. The ducks by the pond quacking loudly. Copper's ears perked up, and he started chasing them around the fields. After the wild chase, Copper found himself near the barn, alone and a little lost, the old wooden barn creaking with the gentle breeze. Finally, he heard his name called in the distance. It was time for dinner. Okay, so first let's identify the fragments, and then we're going to talk about different ways to fix them. The first fragment we have is on a sunny morning. This is a fragment because there is no subject and there is no verb. The next fragment we have is wagging his tail at every new scent. We're missing a subject. We only have the verb wagging. The next fragment we have is the ducks by the pond quacking loudly. We do have a subject, the ducks, and we do have part of the verb, quacking, but we're missing a helping verb. The next fragment we have is alone and a little lost. Again, we're missing a subject and a verb. And finally, the last fragment we have is the old wooden barn creaking with the gentle breeze. Here, we're missing a helping verb again. We have the subject, the barn, but we're missing a helping verb before creaking. So now I want to show you how we can fix these fragments. The easiest way to fix the first fragment is just to combine it with the second sentence. On a sunny morning, comma, Copper explored our family farm. The next fragment was wagging his tail at every new scent. There are a few ways we could fix this, and one is to add a subject and a verb. He was wagging his tail at every new scent. He being Copper. Even though we use the subject pronoun it for animals, oftentimes when it's our pet, we use he or she. Another way to fix this would be to combine it with the previous sentence. It had rained the previous night, and Copper loved trotting through the muddy fields and wagging his tail at every new scent. In the second paragraph, we would add the helping verb were. The ducks by the pond were quacking loudly. We're talking in the past tense, so we would not use are. We have to use the past tense, were. The next fragment was alone and a little lost. So here we could add the subject, he or Copper, and then a verb, was. Another way to correct this fragment, alone and a little lost, is just to add a comma after barn. After the wild chase, Copper found himself near the barn, comma, alone and a little lost. We're providing extra information about how Copper found himself. And the last fragment, the old wooden barn creaking with the gentle breeze, we take away the comma and we'll add a helping verb was. The old wooden barn was creaking with the gentle breeze. So let me know in the comments section how many fragments you were able to identify out of 5. And if you had any other ways to correct these fragments, you can feel free to share them in the comment section below as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next lesson.